So, ladies and gentlemen, we called you to respond to a few of the issues that have been raised this afternoon by Mr. Odinga and one Mother Karua, addressing the press from wherever they were addressing them from. And having listened to what they have said, we want to respond and say that, one, the claim that theirs are peaceful demonstrations is indeed ridiculous. Because what we have seen so far, the demonstrations have nothing close to being peaceful picketing or demonstrations. And we are posing the question, how can the demos be peaceful? Yet they are burning police cars, raping innocent mamambogas, looting shops and robbing motorists, as happened yesterday and last Monday in Kawangware, Mathare, Embakasi, and in our CBD respectively. But curiously, none of these incidents, including the burning of a police car yesterday, or the raping of not less than 3 mamambogas in Mathare, none of these incidents, curiously, were reported in mainstream media. And I say curiously, none of those incidents of rape, beastly acts of rape, of innocent mamambogas in Mathare were reported last Monday by the mainstream media. Curiously again, yesterday, a police car was torched in broad daylight in the view of media cameras. Again, curiously, the mainstream media chose not to report that as part of their news. We want to state that this is a deliberate campaign of misinformation and a well-choreographed script to tarnish the government's image and name, and specifically targeting a few of us. And I want to remind you, the allegations by Mr. Odinga only last week on Wednesday or Thursday, when he alleged that the Honorable Deputy President, Honorable Rigathi Gachagua, the Honorable Ndindi Nyoro, the member for Kiharu, and myself had hatched a scheme of unleashing violence to protesters yesterday. That was only last week. You are all witnesses, since you are out there, what happened, whether such schemes were there. We know this is a deliberate and well-choreographed script by Mr. Odinga and his team to profile, especially those of us from the Mount Kenya region, where their sponsor and project owner of Project Azimio comes from. Mr. Odinga knows Rigathi Gachagua for many years. He knows he's an honest man. He knows he's a truthful man, and as he says, and a peaceful one for that matter. Mr. Odinga has also had the opportunity to know myself. For the last 10 years, I've been a member of parliament. He knows the Honorable Ndindi Nyoro, at least for the last 5 years, he has been a member of parliament. And he knows we are equally peaceful men. When we were shoved out of a government that we fought for in 2017 by the handshake regime, we had all the options that Mr. Odinga and his brigade of goons and hooligans are employing today, including violent protests like they are doing. But we chose, under the leadership of William Ruto, to pursue an honest conversation with the people of Kenya. And we had that conversation that culminated in our success in the elections of 2022. Therefore, Mr. Odinga does know that right from President William Ruto, the Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua, the leader of majority in the National Assembly, Ichungwa, the chairman of the Budget and Appropriations Committee, Ndindi Nyoro, are peaceful, honest men who are also believers in the rule of law and believers in constitutionalism. Mr. Odinga also knows he is the one who has a track record as a political operative whose history of anarchy and bloodshed is littered across the many years he has been in operations as a politician. Violence, and indeed political violence, is synonymous with Odinga, not our president, neither any of us in the Kenya Kwanza coalition. And if violence, as Kenyans know, is synonymous with the name Odinga, anarchy is his middle name, and bloodshed is his only currency to political power. We've also had Mr. Odinga and Eunice Wamalwa allege that the international community is on a studious silence over the ongoings in our country. We want to remind Mr. Odinga and Eunice Wamalwa that they asked only a few weeks ago, they called on the international community to keep off Kenya's internal affairs. And we posed the question to Mr. Odinga and his hooligans and goons. Why are you not asking the international community to keep off our internal affairs for you to orchestrate a campaign of anarchy and disinformation? Then you turn around to employ the script you employed in 2007 to create anarchy and bloodshed, then appeal to the international community as you did in 2007 to negotiate you into political power. We want to ask the international community to keep watch of the ongoings, and particularly the International Criminal Court, to keep track of the script being employed by Mr. Odinga and his sponsors, and the campaign of violence that they have unleashed on Kenyans, and the well-choreographed campaign of disinformation, which is characteristic, we must say, of Mr. Odinga and his team. We've also had Mr. Odinga allege that the attacks yesterday of the Northlands farm in Ruiru, or on the outskirts of Nairobi, and Spectre East Africa Limited were orchestrated by goons which shamelessly, some of the media houses, I have to say, and I repeat, shamelessly, some of the media houses last night were reporting as government-sponsored goons. And we therefore pose the question, if they are government-sponsored goons, who is the sponsor of the hooligans, the rapists, and the murderers that have ravaged our country in the last 3 weeks? We pose the question to Mr. Odinga and his team. Before this administration embarked on a tax collection program under the Kenya Revenue Authority, before this administration embarked on investigations on extrajudicial killings under the handshake regime, before this administration embarked on an aggressive investigation into the massive looting of our economy through the subsidies program, of fuel, of food items, and the infamous telecom sale, this country was very peaceful. It is not until this government and this administration embarked on tax collection measures from people who believed they were above the law and were exempted, or rather exempted themselves from taxation. It is not until investigations of the murderous scheme to enforce disappearances and kill hundreds of Kenyans began, with the investigations of SSU and those who commissioned those killings. It is not until investigations began on the looting spree especially in the last 3 years, the last 3 months of the last regime, that violence suddenly broke out under the pretext that there was a whistleblower who to this day is only known to Mr. Odinga and his sponsor. On Northlands, I listened to the script Mr. Odinga was reading from his sponsor, and we want to pose the following questions to Mr. Odinga. We saw yesterday when the safety and security manager at Spectre East Africa Limited was interviewed by members of the media. He asserted that indeed the National Police Service responded in record time. And in fact, that manager thanked the police for having intervened when the factory was attacked by a group of unknown people. If the police could respond to the attack at Spectre East Africa Limited, we pose the question to Mr. Odinga and his sponsor, how comes we have not seen either the safety manager or the security manager or the hundreds and tens of policemen that guard Northlands estate? And we want to remind all Kenyans that Northlands is not home to anybody else. It is home to 2 former sitting presidents of the Republic of Kenya. The late Mzee Jomo Kenyatta, who is survived by a widow who is still alive, who is entitled to state security and is offered state security, to the immediate former president Uhuru Kenyatta, who is entitled and still enjoys massive state security. Indeed, if you did your investigative journalism, I suspect if there is no small barrack at Northlands, there could be a police post or a police station in Northlands. Kenyans need to ask themselves a curious question: how comes even the policemen, elite policemen who guard Northlands, were nowhere to be seen? We have not had any reports, not from the OCS of the stations around Northlands, not from the OCPD, not from the Inspector General of Police. That was a distress call to the police for backup. What coincidence is it that these attacks happened at a time the organizers knew the police had been kept busy by looters and unpeaceful demonstrators in town? And I think if Kenyans ask themselves those questions, you will then get to see how this script is being rolled out. Nice, that is why we have asserted it is a well-choreographed script by none other than the masters and the lords of violence and anarchy in this country and their sponsors. And therefore, we want to call their bluff and tell them they do know President William Ruto is a believer in democracy and in the rule of law and constitutionalism. Those who are believers in anarchy and bloodshed as the only currents to achieving political power are known. And therefore, they must desist from either the attempts to tarnish the name of the president, the deputy president, or any of us as leaders in the Kenya Kwanza coalition. And if they have issues, we have said it before, as members of parliament, our doors are open. Parliament is open. Even now, when the National Assembly is on recess, the Senate is in session. Issues that are of concern to the Kenyan people, like the cost of living, have got an avenue where we can discuss these issues. Otherwise, I think it is quite clear that the script is being rolled out, cause anarchy, cause bloodshed, make the country ungovernable, call on the religious community and the international community to force government into negotiations, negotiate yourself into power. We know that script, Mr. Odinga, and we want to assure you it shall not happen. You have only one choice: to choose to abide by the laws of our country and do whatever you want to do within the provisions of our constitution without interfering with the rights of other Kenyans to assemble. And in conclusion, let me draw parallels, because I've had them try to belabor that theirs are peaceful demonstrations and picketing. Less than a month ago, the business community from Nyamakema and downtown staged almost a 10,000 men walk from River Road, Nyamakema, to the office of the president on Harambee Avenue. And they delivered a petition there, peacefully. They did the same to the office of the deputy president across the road. They walked to the gate of Senate, Parliament, and delivered a petition, peacefully. Escorted by police. Nobody looted anybody's business. Why is it that Mr. Odinga's protests and processions have to come with burning of police cars, beastly acts like raping of innocent mama mbogas, as happened in Mathare, the unfortunate incidents you saw yesterday in Kibra, pitting religious groups against each other, pitting ethnic communities against each other. And I want to be very clear, this script is only synonymous with the workings and operations of none other than Raila Amolo Odinga. He is the only person who has pitted communities against each other. He is the only person in the history of this country who has used anarchy and bloodshed as the only currency to achieve political power. Kwa hayo mengi, nikomeshea hapo. Presidents and terrorists and the people that are raining terror on innocent citizens of this republic.